We here in the man cave. We got leaders of a beautiful struggle. We got Dayvon Love, Director of Public Policy, and CEO Adam Jackson. How you feel, bro?
Good. How you feeling?
Oh man, welcome to the man cave.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
Oh man, we need leaders out here in the city today. So leaders of a beautiful struggle. So what is your organization about? What are y'all trying to achieve?
So we're a grassroots think tank that advocates specifically for the interests of black people.
Right.
So one of the things that make Adam and I unique is we actually participated in policy debate. So it's one of those activities where a lot of people that come out of it end up being in the political arena. Not even just politicians, but they end up like really working behind the scenes.
Okay.
And so when we finished with debate, we looked around in Baltimore and said a lot of the people that was advocating on issues that impacted our community weren't people of and from our community.
Right.
So that's why we built Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. And so we've been tackling issues like criminal justice, mass incarceration, police brutality.
Right.
So those are like the major issues that, we work on.
So how long y'all organization been established and when did y'all start?
So we founded it in 2010. So it's been 8 years since we started. And so one of the first things we worked on, Maryland was going to build a $104 million juvenile detention facility for youth charged as adults.
Right.
And so if you think about a 180-bed facility, and at the time, the juvenile system wasn't even all the way full. So, if they build more beds, they're going to try to fill it.
Right.
So a big part of our push was to get them to not build it so that they had to have alternatives to incarceration, make it so that people got some kind of like community-based community-based program instead of putting them in jail.
Right. So you're the director of
Public policy.
Public policy.
Yeah, so most of my work is actually directly interact with elected officials, politicians. So I spend a lot of time in Annapolis, City Hall. So I'm the one that go actually interface with them.
Okay. And you're the CEO. So you created this monster.
Well, we co-founded it. I handle the money, the administration, making sure the day-to-day operations gets handled.
Okay. So what did you do? What do you bring to the table?
I mean, my job is to raise money.
Right.
So, and one of the things that we had talked about early on when we founded LBS, it was important to us as a political organization that we were financially independent because, a lot of black people, what happens is we create nonprofits to do advocacy work, and then you become beholden to some of these white organizations that pay your salary, basically.
One of the things that I talked about earlier, the youth jail. So it was interesting because when we first started fighting against the jail, everybody was telling us, it was going to get built.
Right.
So we were really glad to see that we were successful in stopping that from being built. That was 2013. One of our latest things we're working on, so one of the things we talk a lot about is the nonprofit industrial complex. So you have a lot of people that's making money off the suffering of black people.
Right.
And I think a lot of times people don't recognize that it's a lot of money in servicing poor black kids. But the problem is the people that's getting money off of that is not our folks. It's white people that come into our communities making money off of it, or like these black gatekeepers, who will say enough to make them look like, they for the community, but really don't work in the interests of our community. And so one of the things that we were involved in was the Baltimore City Youth Fund. So Baltimore City in 2016 created this $12 million fund. So $12 million a year is dedicated money for youth and children. And so Adam was he was the co-chair of the task force appointed by the city council president to decide where that money goes.
Right.
And so we're actually in the process now of structuring that fund in such a way where we trying to make sure that it gets into the hands of organizations that really are in the community.
Right.
Because traditionally you get those kind of big box corporate nonprofits that suck up all the money. But we've worked on is making sure that $12 million, it's $12 million a year, per year, every year. We're going to make sure that money actually gets into the hands of people that know our community and really care about our community.
Right. But I seen something when you was on the show with Roland Martin, when you were saying that black people were so comfortable being going to the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party is just we know we got the black vote. So what do you think we should be, independent or?
So here's, and I'm glad you asked that question, because a lot of people don't recognize, so Maryland as a state and Baltimore as a city is a Democratic Party stronghold.
Right.
So what that means, so if you ever go to a voter registration, right? They're gonna tell you register as a Democrat. And the reason they're gonna tell you register as a Democrat is because the Democrats this city is so overwhelmingly Democrat that if you're not a Democrat, you can't vote.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Your vote don't matter if you're a Republican or anything else.
Right.
So we're registered Democrats because that's just the way it's set up. It's set up that the Democratic primary is the only thing that matters.
Right.
So the reason why that's important is because there's a whole system in place that make it so that people get to pick who's in leadership. So a lot of the people that's in elected office were handpicked years ago. And they were handpicked by white corporate interests, right? That, again, don't really have an interest in our community.
Right.
And part of the problem is that we got a lot of black elected officials who are good at showing up to church before election day. They're good at showing up to the cookouts and stuff like that. But when it comes to really pushing against the power structure in Annapolis or in City Hall, they don't really show up.
Right.
And so the point that I was making in that clip you saw is that, like, we got to start building our own independent power base politically and putting our money behind it. You know what I mean? Because the people in the opposition, they're funding candidates that are hurting our people. Let me give you a real specific example. One of our biggest successes last session, we fought the bail bonds industry. So between 2011 and 2016, the bail bonds industry made $265 million, right, in the state of Maryland.
Right.
$75 million just off of people who never were convicted of anything.
Right.
So you're talking about millions and millions of dollars that the bail bonds industry was taking home. And if you think about bail, like, you just charged, right? You haven't been convicted, right? And if you're not a danger to the community, then you should be let out without having to pay nothing.
Right.
But the bail bonds industry was making a lot of money, so we actually were involved in an effort to change it so that judges actually have to make sure that then when they give you a bail, it's a bail that you can afford, if they should give you one at all. The bail bonds industry paid for a dinner in Annapolis at Ruth's Chris, where they brought together the black elected officials, right? Gave them free dinner. And what they did was they pretty much sold them their version. They were basically saying you need to keep bail, cash bail in place.
Right.
And so we had to fight the black legislators. We had to fight Baltimore City legislators who were being wined and dined. Now, luckily, just because of the work we do in our organization and the reach we have with the community, we was able to kind of put them on blast. And so we was able to be successful in beating the bail industry.
Right.
But that's what I mean. Like, we got to build more, like, and because, like Adam said, we're an independent organization.
Right.
So ain't no phone call nobody can make to say, oh, they getting too out of hand, you need to pull it. Like, nobody can make that phone call. You know what I'm saying? So it allowed us to be able to do that the way we did it.
Okay. I got one more question for us. This can go to either one of you guys. If anything can go into effect today, it's law. What would y'all change in our community right now and go into effect and make a various change in our community? What would y'all do? What would the main thing y'all would do?
Get more money to black people, because I think that's the biggest issue. One of the biggest problems that we find is not the lack of expertise or lack of hard work in terms of what black people do in Baltimore. And I feel like the lie we tell ourselves is that black people don't never have nothing, we don't do nothing in our community.
Right.
But the reality is, if we just had more money, power, and resources to execute what we're already doing, then we'd be able to have a bigger impact in a city like Baltimore.
Right.
But I feel like because we have lack of access, that's why we're not as effective.
Right.
And if you just look at it generationally, if you look at racism in an American context, we just haven't had access to that amount of money like white folks have for generations since slavery. And so from my perspective, if you have more money, more power, more access, particularly money, I think that we just need more resources to actually execute what we already have. Because I feel like we have brilliance that's already embedded in our community in the first place.
Right.
And the more we focus on that, instead of looking to outsiders and people that aren't from Baltimore to put programming in the heads of our children, or to make sure that we have access to healthcare, healthy food, like, we should just look in our own community and look at that brilliance and invest in it, as opposed to looking for other people to do it.
Right. You agree with that?
I agree with that.
All right, man. I appreciate that, man. Look, leaders of a beautiful struggle. There's guys out here, man, that's doing positive things in our community. We need to get behind them, support them. Appreciate you, brothers.
Yeah, appreciate the invitation.